Viewer discretion is advised. Just when you thought the seas were safe. Butt Pirates of the Caribbean, Gay Man's Chest.
Yo, lads, batten down the hatches, go ahead and swap the diggity decks, and we'll have a biscuit and a cribbity ding dong when we're done with the
He
wing.
thought the curse was broken.
Where's Captain Crack Sparrow?
When all it was really doing was hiding in the
Oh, they're
closet.
flanking our mud dungeon! Hunker down before they get in behind us! Oh, Captain, I'm sorry to inform you, but I think we're being followed by butt pirates. Crack Sparrow! I know you're on this butt shit.
Starring Johnny Deeper as Captain Crack Sparrow.
Grab me kettle and clean out the coffee can. I'm about to dip me biscuit in a dark glass of mantic.
Orlando Broomstick as William Burner.
Those pirates are mad, Sparrow. They have meat cannons.
And that one chick that nobody cares about because this is a gay movie.
Load the cannons and prepare to fire off. When I find Sparrow, I'll show him my pork sword.
This summer,
When you're done scrubbing the decks, you'll scrub me ass.
the seas
Has anyone ever told you your sash makes you look queer?
get gay.
You're the kind of pirate that would blast on a dead man's chest.
Butt Pirates of the Caribbean, Gay Man's Chest, in theaters this summer.
Pick Buccaneers. Let's see, even though this has nothing to do with on-field play, these uniforms are disgusting. You started out 0-26. I'm gonna put an early stoppage on this one. That's just not fair. 0-26. FA Buccaneers, Brian Glazer, Edward Glazer, Joel Glazer, and his wife. Oh, would you look at that? We've come full circle now as the Glazers made their money in both the oil and the real estate business. How precedented is that? They did orchestrate the hiring of John Gruden from the Raiders and got them a title. And not much else. Way back when the Bucs sucked and Steve DeBerg led their squad, they blew a 25-point lead to the then St. Louis Cardinals. Up 28-3 in the third, the Bucs laid down like a cheap prostitute, and Neil Lomax led the comeback, with the Cards winning 31-28. 28-3. That sounds familiar. The Bucs threw their Week 17 game in 2014 so that it would be them who got the first overall pick in the draft, not the Titans. Playing the Saints and leading 20-7, they pulled starters and made curious play calls as they would end up losing and then drafting Jameis Winston. Featuring a design similar to that of Miami's Orange Bowl, it's worth noting that should a biblical flood occur in South Tampa, there is a large pirate ship available to hold 2 of every species to repopulate the earth. The old Tampa Stadium used to be next to the Ray J, and you can make out the remnants as it was demolished in 1999. More Rich Gannon-led slaughter. How did the Raiders not win a Super Bowl? Oh, yeah. The Bucs just didn't have it against Gruden's Raiders, who did it mostly on the ground with Napoleon Kaufman and Tyrone Wheatley rushing for over 110 yards and 2 TDs each. It's all good. The Bucs got him back 3 years later when Bill Callahan mailed them their Super Bowl ring. Speaking of hot turnovers, the Bucs jersey is the game day uniform of our favorite headline grabber, Florida Man, aka Jameis Winston. Also serving as a digital clock display, the jersey looks sleek and dynamic as the franchise has no idea what to do with their uber-groping #1 overall draft pick versus their QB who is about as consistent as unstirred oatmeal. Remember, when you have 2 quarterbacks, you have no quarterback. The phrase $1 million arm and 10-cent head has never been more appropriately applied to anyone other than famous Jameis and his turnover bakery. Now, you can't blame the desperate Bucs for taking Winston with the #1 overall pick in a draft that was about as deep as an Instagram model's personality for QBs, but what has backfired has been their willingness to put up with his ridiculous antics combined with his lack of production. Let's see, stealing soda, stealing crab legs, yelling FHRITP on a table
principal at his alma mater and groping an Uber driver. All of that for 74 TDs and 50 INTs in 4 seasons. Have fun drafting another QB in 2019. Looking like your typical Florida resident, Captain Fear rolls out of bed and portrays a big tough pirate. Here's Captain Fear getting yelled at when Jameis found out he doesn't like eating W's. Also, who remembers Ryan Fitzpatrick? Oh, this sword needs some additions. That's much better. We gotta add some big old hands to this in case any Uber drivers walk by. Oh, and of course we gotta put this turnover here. Right, Jameis? Salty like a pretzel. It seems like these days there's so much to complain about, whether it be arguing about Jameis, your coaching carousel, all the losing lately, but you still live in Tampa and can get hammered in decent weather. Most of the salt y'all consume is on the rim of a margarita glass. Your golden boy #1 Heisman winner was sat last year for a Harvard grad with a beard worthy of a master brewer. However, your fan base, that is FSU alum, won't let anyone criticize famous. Go back to your waterfront bar and argue with some UF alum about who was better in college, Mr. Crablegs or Touchdown Jesus, because that's generating more buzz than this team is. Bruce Arians unretiring is the only interesting thing this year, and that's triggering enough for you to start throwing haymakers at each other. Nicknamed the Big Sombrero, Tampa Stadium also hosted 2 Super Bowls. Though the stadium provided good sight lines, it was constructed out of concrete and exposed its fans to unbearable heat. Demolished in 1999, Raymond James was built adjacent to the old site. You can see the outline of Tampa Stadium and the field next to the new venue. The future site of Super Bowl 55, Raymond James hosted 2 big games, one an absolute slaughter of the G-Men by Ray Lewis and the other a close affair for the Cardinals, which ended really badly for them. Ray J was nearly entirely funded by local taxes, more on that later. I get the pirate ship for the Bucks, but for a neutral site game it looks like they just support plundering and thievery. I give you an average. The site of a moving rendition of the national anthem by the late Whitney Houston, Tampa Stadium would later see one of the NFL's most famous missed field goals. Used as a bargaining chip against the city of Tampa, the stadium's substandard condition, combined with threats from owner Malcolm Glazier, caused its demolition in 1999 and the aforementioned Ray J to be built entirely with public funds. It was a large, hot concrete bowl and it wasn't all that great, honestly. You find this one much higher on the list for 2 main reasons. It's close to the Tampa airport and it has a pirate ship in it. This is supposedly the site of Super Bowl LV. Hopefully that happens. And our #1 tankers are... There's no greater evidence of a clear and obvious tank than Week 17 of the 2014 season in a game between the Saints and the Buccaneers. All the 2-13 Bucs needed to do to secure the first overall pick was lose. The problem was that they led by 13 at halftime, so in order to get the QB they wanted, the Bucs unleashed the Panzer, pulling all their starters and pulled out a most thrilling defeat. The glorious loss netted them Jameis Winston, whose first pass as a Buccaneer in 2015 was intercepted and returned for a touchdown, and his final pass as a Buccaneer was intercepted and returned for a touchdown in 2019. That just about sums it up. The team never made the playoffs with Winston, peaking at 9-7 in 2016 and finished with a losing record in 4 of those 5 seasons, led by 3 different head coaches. The roster's always had talent too. Winston had weapons like Mike Evans, Vincent Jackson, Chris Goodwin, Cameron Brate, and O.J. Howard. The Bakery compiled impressive volume stats, leaving as the Bucs' all-time passing leader. The problem, we know, was that he couldn't hang on to the ball. In 70 starts, Winston threw 88 picks, including 30 in his legendary 30-for-30 season in 2019. The tank was clearly not worth it in the long run. Neither Winston nor the next pick, Marcus Mariota, turned out to be world beaters, but the Bucs really had the misfortune of needing a quarterback in a draft where the only one currently with the winning record is Trevor Siemian, the last one picked. Yeesh. Of course, you can always rebuild the old-fashioned way, signing free agents and praying it doesn't blow up in your face. And to all the glorious tankers, roll on. Despite starting 7-37 in his first 3 seasons, Jack McKay avoids this distinction for his incredible, self-aware sound bites like, "We didn't tackle well, but we made up for it by not blocking." Congrats, Greg Schiano, you're the worst. Not just for going 11-21, but for telling his players to go 100% on a kneel down. What a douche.
Somehow, this stretch does not involve the inaugural Bucs team that finished 0-14 in 1976. It does involve one of the worst decisions in NFL history, however, the mismanagement of Steve Young. Young reported to the Bucs in 1985 after ghosting them for the USFL, only to play bad on a bad team and finally receive a trade to the 49ers, where he became Joe Montana's backup and then a Hall of Famer himself. That just about sums up the Bucs in the mid-80s. They chose Steve DeBerg over Steve Young. But that's what bad teams do. They fail to recognize talent, and even when they do luck into a star, they squander their gifts and ship them off to the teams who can recognize.
October 28th, 2018, the once highly touted quarterback prospect Jameis Winston was benched by the Buccaneers. A promising career potentially shot in flames. Famous Jameis discovers his true calling. As one life might die, the smells of another business opportunity waft in from the kitchen. Coming soon to the Tampa Bay area, world famous Jameis's Bakery. These tasty concoctions are sure to give you a first down on life. Your mouth will explode with flavor that you'll be eating a W every time. Think of all the delicious bounties at your disposal. Turnovers.
Jameis' first pass, intercepted, sensible.
Turnover.
Down goes Winston, ball comes loose.
And more turnovers.
And it's intercepted.
You too can experience what defenses across the NFL enjoy every week. The giving spirit of Jameis. In fact, he's so eager for you to try his product that a portion of proceeds will be going to the Foundation of Residually Assaulted Uber Drivers and Battalion of Unloved Sports Teams. Walk the plank, take the plunge, whatever you do, non-sexually harass your way to the front of this line. After closing, come outside to our very own shoplifting zone where we dump our excess stock for your enjoyment. Physical safety not guaranteed. Be the hero that Jameis tries to be on every play. Grab a baker's dozen of our trademark turnovers for your family at world-famous Jameis's Bakery. If our pastries were a woman, you'd fuck her right in the pussy. The bakery is not responsible for apathy towards the Bucs organization or comparisons to Jamarcus Russell. Opening date to be set upon the heat death of the earth.
I'm going to ask you a question, and there's no wrong answer here. Who do you think is the worst owner in NFL history? I can hear the arguments for George Preston Marshall, especially with his reluctance to integrate. More recently, Dan Snyder, whom most of us would like to refer to as a sniveling rat. Perhaps you're more resigned to hating the likes of Mike Brown and his iron grip on the Bengals, or Jimmy Haslam's corruption with the Browns, or you're more into the regional bias with the likes of Art Modell, Ken Behring, Bob Irsay, Bud Adams, or Stan Kroenke. But I implore you to look past these examples. Dig deeper into the heart of the matter and you will find a perfect storm of terrible. A man who exemplifies the worst traits of sports ownership. Insanely cheap, treacherously backstabbing, incompetent in on-field matters, yet incredibly invested in making money at the expense of the product. You will find Hugh Culverhouse. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers of the early days, I call him another term. The worst owner in NFL history. 1976. The bicentennial of these fine United States of America. And the hatching of teams from the NFL's egg. Looking at the blue skies of Tampa, Florida, the Buccaneers are blinded by this world and the vast majesty that it encompasses. The unfortunate problem for this fledgling franchise is that its parents were colossal assholes. They lifted table scraps and sawdust to choose from. Their expansion draft was legendary for how awful it was. Teams were able to protect 30 players in their 42-man rosters, and protect another player after one was lost, and teams could only lose a maximum of 3 players. They had to fight Seattle for these gnawed bones. But that wouldn't be the biggest punishment Tampa would suffer. That would be their new owner in Hugh Culverhouse, a former tax attorney for the IRS who built himself to wealth in Jacksonville. He nearly bought the Rams from Dan Reeves' estate in 1971, but got undercut by Carroll Rosenblum and Bob Irsay in a switcheroo. Culverhouse sued the NFL and got a chance to potentially own an expansion franchise after the first suitor was caught up in a messy divorce. At first glance, Culverhouse seems okay enough, but he had a fatal flaw that ruined the Bucks. He was a skinflint. His cheapness with everything surrounding him infected the team, to his offices, to his own clothing. He cared not for the score line, the stat line, or the goal line. He was only interested in the bottom line. If he were forced to pay a fee to rescue himself from a dungeon, he'd have allowed himself to rot. Anything to save a penny. Tampa Bay's inaugural season in 1976 was hilariously awful. 141 players went through, but they had no offense. Their main defensive scheme was Leroy Selman. They couldn't block real good, but made up for it by not tackling. The only punch they offered was on Johnny Carson. When John McKay was asked about his team's execution, he was in favor of it. Now, going 0-14 in some of the ugliest football the league has seen in decades is one thing, but what made it sting harder was the cheapskate known as Culverhouse. Their team's practice facilities were right next to the airport without a proper weight room. He had the walls painted white so he didn't have to pay for projector screens. He requested their first office building pay for team letterhead. A front office assistant for the Bucks qualified for welfare. He charged players for things like cans of Coke, phone calls made at a hotel, and jerseys that were ripped to alleviate an injury. The team plane was a rattletrap leased from a group that specialized in chainsaws. McCullough Company was doing so well that Culverhouse had to pay for fuel out of his own pockets sometimes. He didn't like that, but he did like it when the Bucks finally won a game against the New Orleans Saints at the Superdome. 27 games into their existence. The whole damn team and city celebrated as if they had won the Super Bowl. New Orleans honored their defeat by firing Hank Stram into the Gulf of Mexico near simultaneously. And even worse, the Bucks would end up winning another game before the end of the 1977 season. Pants were instantly shat. The good times for the rest of us were over. After being the butt of everyone's joke, Tampa Bay developed from a rather forgettable 5-11 outfit in 1978 to one of the surprise upstarts in 1979. Thanks to an elite defense led by Leroy Selman and a young quarterback from Grambling State named Doug Williams. When they made the NFC Championship game that year, endless pants were shat. A team this good this early? There had to be a catch. And there was. And it wasn't losing to the Rams in the championship game. It also wasn't Hugh Culverhouse being the head trustee to the Rams estate. Keep going. It's that Culverhouse was cheap, and his cheapness prevented him from hiring a true general manager. Therefore, the head coach would get complete autonomy over the roster and personnel decisions. If it's someone who's allegedly a lifetime coach like John McKay, I guess it could be stomached, but not when they throw out future first-round picks like they're candy. Consider 1979's first-rounder. Traded to the Bears for a Wally Chambers with a bum knee and would be gone in 2 years. That pick became the 4th selection, and was converted into 5-time All-Pro Dan Hampton. Normally, this would be the end of such pain, but not for Tampa. Take the disaster that was the 1982 draft. Hugh Culverhouse had sent his equipment manager to New York as the team's representative. The choices were between Sean Farrell, a guard out of Penn State, and Booker Reese, a defensive end out of Bethune-Cookman. After some deliberation, the Bucks war room chose the physical specimen of Reese. Only problem was that the phone reception was garbage. Thanks to that and a shitload of noise in the room, the rep mishears and hands in the card for Farrell. The war room prolapses. Hugh Culverhouse had a conniption. Tampa Bay tried to plead with Rozelle to undo the pick, but no backsies. This is when the Bucks did what we call a pro-gamer move. Booker Reese was still available in the second round, yet Tampa didn't have their second rounder. So why not trade next year's first to pick Reese? It worked out perfectly. If you consider Reese becoming a massive bust who was traded for a 12th round pick 3 years later is perfect. I hate to inform you, but the 1983 draft was very deep. And while their selection only became Willie Gault, it could have been used to pick Dan Marino, Ken O'Brien, or used to trade up to pick Jim Kelly. So why did I mention quarterbacks? Because it was the final year of Doug Williams' contract. He was only the best player on the team not named Leroy Selman. A consistent leader, clutch player, and great offensive catalyst for the era. The main problem was that he wasn't getting paid like it. Doug was making less than every other starter in the league, and half of the NFL's backups. Culverhouse was considered to be a likable owner before this point due to making the playoffs 3 times in 4 years, but here is where he begins to sabotage the team. Williams asked for a $600,000 salary to make him one of the higher-paid QBs in the league. Hugh set his offer at $400,000, and wouldn't budge for anything. John McKay begged Hugh to side with his quarterback, but Hugh had other ideas. Say, Doug, instead of giving you money, why not invest it in Tampa Sphere? It's only the greatest real estate opportunity in history. For a $200,000 loan, he get a 2% share of the action. That's right. A loan for a concept that wasn't even being constructed yet. If you try to look for it, good luck. The area was supposed to be in is now a Walmart. The holdout would be long in the tooth. And you ordered another glorious move in trading a first-round pick to Cincinnati for the throw-in Samoan known as Jack Thompson. He was trying to put the squeeze on Doug, but he didn't take something into consideration. The USFL. Williams saw it as an opportunity to escape, and he did so. He may have gotten fucked in Tampa Bay, but he would get his revenge. He'd eventually be reunited with Joe Gibbs in Washington, and lead the Redskins to a Super Bowl win in 1988, becoming the game's MVP in the process. So Washington, if you ever wanted to thank someone for extending your proud tradition, thank Hugh Culverhouse. The Bucs, without the QB that led them to glory, completely fell apart in 1983. Do you want to know how bad it gets? Fans were openly cheering their opponents when the Bucs lost. After Williams left, they would accrue at least 10 losses a season for the next decade plus. Even worse, remember that they traded their first-rounder this year for Jack Thompson. He was nowhere near Williams' caliber. Outright ineffective and cut in 2 seasons. For this failed power play maneuver, the Bucs traded the first overall pick. It was a weak draft, but they still could have gotten Irving Fryer or Carl Banks with it. The good news with all of this losing is that they didn't have to give away many game balls. Good for the players, as they wouldn't be built by the team for them. Saves them enough money to run to Wendy's for lunch during practice. Quarterback problems would continue on and on. Culverhouse tried to offer the same damn Tampa Ponzi sphere stake to Warren Moon, but he wisely said no. After Jack Thompson failed, it was a second-round pick for Steve DeBerg. He was to assist a supplemental first-rounder in Steve Young, who was both a poor fit for the scheme Tampa was running and had nothing around him. In another case of completely mismanaging elite talent and nearly ruining him by exiling him to Cardinal Hell, Young was traded to San Francisco for a second and a fourth-round pick. So just in case you wanted to thank somebody for the Young Montana controversy, you can point right to Hugh Culverhouse. Remember that coaches had roster autonomy. Ray Perkins wanted Heisman winner Vinny Testaverde as his QB, which burned another first overall pick. To properly describe his early years in Tampa, he was awful. Just awful. The terrible team around him shattered his confidence and destroyed any semblance of development he may have had. After years of frustratingly slow progress, the Bucs did another goddamn pro gamer move by trading a first-round pick in 1992 to the Colts for Chris Chandler. If they thought Testaverde was bad, Chandler was even worse than that. Spent more time bickering to the press before being waived a year and a half into his tenure. For the price of Chris Chan, Tampa ended up surrendering the second overall pick in the draft. It was used to pick Quentin Coriat, who didn't become much, but it could have been used for Sean Gilbert, Terrell Buckley, Troy Vincent, or Bob Whitfield. The guy who replaced him off the bench? Vinny goddamn Testaverde. He'd be free from this hell by 1993. But none of that chaos holds a candle to what happened to Bo Jackson. In 1986, the legendary Auburn running back was in the middle of a stellar baseball season for the school. But Tampa had their eyes set on him. They wanted to bring him in for a physical and tour of the facilities. Everything paid for by the team, including flight, hotel, meals, the works. There's nothing to worry about, Bo. The Bucs cleared it with the NCAA and SEC. It's perfectly legal. The problem was that it wasn't. The trip violated his amateur standing in the SEC, and he was stripped of eligibility from the baseball team in the middle of the season. It doesn't matter what the Bucs did, Bo believed it was a conspiracy to keep him away from baseball. He told Culverhouse and the team, "Do not draft me. I will never come to Tampa Bay. You'll be wasting your pick if you do." Come the day of the 1986 draft, do you know what these fuckers do with the first pick? They take Bo Jackson. Culverhouse believed that Bo would forgive them for their power play with what he called the biggest offer in NFL history. Yet for some reason he kept trying to plug real estate deals to him. He offered him a stake in undeveloped land in Sarasota. It was both hubris and underestimating Jackson's resolve. He had an out, and it was baseball. He turned down the Bucs to play for the Kansas City Royals for much less money. A year later, he not only got drafted by the Raiders, but was allowed to play baseball as well. So if you ever wondered about the start of the two-sport legend of Bo Jackson, look no further than Culverhouse. After this, you vowed to never draft another baseball player again, which nearly cost them John Lynch in 1993. It doesn't end there either. You had a huge role in NFL labor negotiations due to his past as an accountant. Every move he made was made for one reason: to fuck over players. In 1982, he pulled every dirty card in the book to get a better deal. Don't forget 1987. The replacement players fiasco? Culverhouse was the main one banging the table for them. He'd pay money to other owners to pay off debts while securing sweetheart rates on loans due to his income from the team. The owners praised his negotiating savvy, use of technology, and financial skills, but he was insanely secretive with his tactics. Financial statements never included a cash flow or how much they were paying key figures in the league hierarchy. It all adds up because Hugh cried poor. He played that fiddle so long he threatened to play 3 games a year at the Citrus Bowl in Orlando and entertained an offer to move the Bucks to Sacramento in the late 80s. All the while, accounting reports revealed that Hugh's not only lying, he's one of the most profitable owners in the league. Not to mention he might have been taking a salary like a few other owners did at the time. It's all because he wouldn't pay players and he gave away top draft picks like they were nothing. Strangely enough, he paid top dollars for head coaches. He paid a rich sum to lure John McKay from USC, giving him a lifetime contract even when every fan in existence wanted him fired. Thanks to health issues and frustrations with the organization's penny pinching, he retired in 1984. After that came Lehman Bennett, who was only good for cronyism and creating a culture so apathetic and undisciplined it was known as Buccaneer Beach. After him came Ray Perkins from Alabama. His authoritarian hand did little more than eventually alienate the locker room. You then wanted to pry Bill Walsh out of the broadcast booth, but he rejected them because he didn't want to pay extra for a head coach he wanted. So they pumped the ball to next year by keeping the placeholder known as Richard Williamson around. He didn't work out too well. That offseason, a huge hoopla was made about Bill Parcells. Hewitt stated an agreement was made between them, with him getting complete control of operations, even though Tuna said no such thing. After considering the offer, Bill turned them down, which led Culverhouse to say he felt like he'd been jilted at the altar. After another lengthy coaching search, this led to Sam White of Bengals fame. He unsurprisingly did not work out either. Culverhouse's reign of error would eventually end in the mid-90s. Lung cancer was detected in 1992 and slowly weakened him and his grip on the team. After treatment to stop the cancer failed, he succumbed to death in August of 1994. With all of this in mind, you can make a strong argument for Hugh Culverhouse being the worst owner in NFL history. His teams weren't only mostly terrible, but they were handicapped by frugality that hasn't been seen this side of Scrooge McDuck. Worst of all, he had significant influence in league affairs. So while he helped to make the league more profitable and efficient, it mostly came at the expense of players and fans. And in some cases, his non-playing employees by cutting health insurance benefits. It's even stranger since Culverhouse donated significant chunks of money to several universities, the Performing Arts, Habitat for Humanity, and the United Way. I wouldn't feel that badly for him, though. After his death, it was quickly revealed that Hugh wasn't only worth more than he was letting on, he had a string of mistresses and extramarital affairs spanning decades. He was shagging waitresses when he was supposedly hard at work, and his wife didn't know about it. Culverhouse and his trust tried to fuck his own family in the wool by means of deception. It led to years of bitter lawsuits. And when it was all over, his widow Joy stated, quote, "I'd like to pull him out of the grave and shoot him with every bullet I could get." He wasn't just a piece of shit to his teams. He was one to his family as well. After he died, let's just say things got better for the Buccaneers. The Glazers are far from the best owners in sports, but compared to Culverhouse, they're the NFL's version of Jeff Vinnick. Once the trust sold, Tampa Bay would enjoy some semblance of success, albeit with another long stretch of seemingly endless futility. Even then, they do have 2 Super Bowl trophies in their arsenal, and have become even more profitable than Hugh Culverhouse could have even dreamed of. But before you think of what the Bucs are now, remember what they've come from. Remember the reign of error. So we'll probably have us Tom Brady's coming back for another year of football. Fuck.